Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the CRM MVP podcast. My name is Dani and I will be your host for this episode. And thank you, Gus, for letting me run the show this time. So, for this episode, what I wanted to share with you and the community is more about real project stories. We often hear about those great and successful client stories, but from experience, not all projects run smoothly from the beginning to the end. And I also know that I've learned the most from those challenging projects. The ones that push you hard and force you to go beyond your comfort zone. So I have invited James Abraham, who is an ex-colleague of mine and who has extensive experience implementing Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. And James will share with us some fascinating stories about one of his most challenging Dynamics 365 projects. So let's listen to my conversation with James. Hi James, how are you, man?
Good, Danny, yourself?
Yes, very good, man. Thank you for accepting my invite and coming on this podcast. So before we really drill into the details, would you mind giving a quick intro about yourself, James?
Sure. So my name's James Abraham. I'm currently a hub lead for Power Apps and Dynamics at Avanade. I've been in consulting probably about the last 9 years, I think, but I've been working with the product since CRM4 first came out. I recall being
Oh
back at
wow, yeah.
back at an organisation and kind of waiting for that drop date to get on board and start playing with it. So I've been in the space for a little while, and of course working with your good self for a few years. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. CRM4 is the one I started my career as well. Actually, I started with CRM3, but just when just when I started, we were moving to CRM4. So I basically just seen, I think, for a few days the screens of CRM3, and then we moved to CRM4.
You
Yeah,
beat me by a little bit.
yeah, quite a bit of years already, man. Time flies. Great. So James, you and I had a chat and discussed a bit the content of this podcast. So I guess what I wanted to discuss with you is, what did you pick? What kind of story did you pick? For us today, and the aim is really to go through this story and go through the challenges and the experiences that you had through your story, and understand how that project evolved, the challenges, the good parts of it, and so that we can all learn, I guess, from your experience, right? So
Sure.
yeah. So what did you pick for us today? Maybe what we can start is to give a bit of a project context introduction.
Sure. So the project I picked, because there's certainly been a lot of good projects over the years, and I can't say that any really stood out as massive horror stories. But there's been a couple that have definitely had some pretty challenging events during them. So this particular one, I guess you'd summarize it as being around property management and some services to go with those. So you're thinking like rentals, long-term leases, and property maintenance type stuff. Mowing lawns and general upkeep
Yeah,
kind
right.
of work.
Yeah.
So it was Dynamics 365 CE project, predominantly bit of integration, sure. It was really using the field service module as well,
Oh yeah.
with a bunch of custom stuff in there. And then, of course, a bit of Power Automate, Power BI. It was using Resco Mobile back in those
Oh
days,
yeah.
and the typical sort of SharePoint and Exchange integration, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think there was about 4 or 5 consultants that worked on that project. Of course, we had a PM, we had a dedicated tester, which is definitely a really good way to go on a project
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And then working with the customer, they had their own sort of dedicated BAs and PMs as well.
Yeah. Perfect. And your role on the project?
So I led that project. So it was solution architecture, solution governance. I was pretty highly involved in the early stages around the analysis and design. That's where things were probably a lot rockier. The actual delivery of this one went very well. But so I guess I'm here to discuss some of those rockier ones with you, and kind of keen to
Yeah.
hear what you might have done in the same situation.
Yeah. Amazing. And I guess so. Can you share, without divulging too much details, what were the challenges that that company was facing that they needed to go with a platform like Dynamics? Are you able to share that with us, or?
Yeah, I think we can. So, it was largely a manual process for them. You can imagine, spreadsheets and things like that, a couple of bespoke tools. Some of those that maybe, it handles maintenance, but doesn't really handle the rental aspect. Um, and really some clear goals that they were trying to achieve were things like minimizing vacancies. That was really a key thing for them.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Obviously, having a vacancy is basically just lost revenue. So
Yeah.
just sort of understanding that those vacancies are coming up and who's fit to try and fill that vacancy and coordinate that change was really key for them.
All right. Yeah. And what kind of methodology did you use? Was it something in particular?
Like a lot of Dynamics projects, I think leaning towards an agile type of methodology, I do think works really well, and that's very common with almost every project we do these days. But it is a topic that I find very interesting because I don't know about you, Danny, but I don't find customers are really in a position to go full agile, go, um, you know, design points, no fixed scope, all of those kinds of things. Typically, a customer's going to have a set amount of money, and they're going to have some goals that they're expecting to achieve, especially at the C level, and they want your project to show that it's going to deliver those things. So, I think in practice, you're pretty much always finding a little bit of a hybrid approach, and one that we've found tends to work reasonably well is a bit more of a waterfall style for analysis and design, getting some high level design, getting reasonable assurity on the estimates for the stories that you're going to build and you can prioritize. And then that lets you frame up sort of the sprints you think it'll be to deliver that. And then you go into a much more, iterative towards agile style of delivering the project.
So tell me, how was this first piece done, the analysis? Give me a bit more details if you can, of course.
Sure. Yeah. So look, there was some, a set of requirements we looked at. So it enabled us to set up a number of workshop sessions that we could go through to start target specific areas. You have a bit of an agenda together, and you can share that with the client and start to get the right audience into those sessions. So this is where the first issue came up, Danny.
Right.
was
Okay. Yeah.
was
Yeah.
workshop one. So
Oh yeah.
I
Okay.
I remember I was on leave before the very first workshop. I think maybe for a couple of weeks. I remember I was coming back the Monday, first thing, straight to the client, straight into this workshop. So I walk into the room, Danny, and yeah, there was at least a dozen people in this workshop. It's just too many. It was way too many. And it definitely showed that it wasn't the right audience. They basically brought everybody into this session pretty much. So it just wasn't targeted. So already I was a little bit on the back foot with that one. Went through a few interactions and things. So I thought back on that, and one of those steps you generally do take is try to make sure that you have the right audience in your workshop sessions. It wasn't there in this one. I'd like to think maybe I probably would have seen that in the week before or something if I wasn't on leave and gone, hey, why do we have 12? But yeah, for whatever reason, we didn't sort of pick that up. The customer didn't pick that up. Yeah. And just to let you know a little background with this customer, like a lot of people, very busy with their day-to-day jobs. So scheduling these sessions was difficult, taking time out of people's days. So you don't want to waste that time, but yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could definitely tell it was going to be pretty hard not to waste the time of several people in that session.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Mm.
And so you said you received a set of requirements. They were, so how was this given to you in a list somewhere, or do you know how they were?
So I believe initially it was an RFP. So
Oh yeah. Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I
So
think it
an
was
RFP with
probably
a list of
it's probably a
requirements.
spreadsheet or something. Yeah, I can't remember
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly the
Yeah.
format now, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
worries. And then basically on that list of requirements, you then spread that in the list of workshop to go through those requirements in more details, I presume.
That's right. Yeah. So we break them down into, I guess, logical work streams. that we felt like made sense. I mean, the ideal thing is you're validating that with the client, right, to make sure that the audience sort of makes sense and that segregation makes sense, which is why we give them agendas as well. So there are a set of those for business processes, and then we'd usually add a couple towards the end, looking at things like data migration, integration, that sort of stuff, more from the technical side. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. So the first workshop already started a bit, was already interesting experience, I guess.
Yeah, it was a bit of a worry when I walked in. I got two other things for you on that first one that was really throwing up some
Yeah.
flags. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
number one, I found out that their key BA that we were working with from the customer side was new.
Yeah, right.
So
Okay.
they'd only been there, yeah, maybe a week or two, a couple of weeks or something like that. So we had a BA that didn't actually have any domain knowledge at that point. And what we found a bit later on down the track was they were probably a bit more theoretical than practical. So yeah, things would start to get a little derailed because they wanted to see like full on as is and to be processes and things like that, and that wasn't kind of the approach we were taking with this project. So it was being a little derailed from the middle. And then here's the other one for you, Danny. I don't know if you've ever had this, but I started this workshop and was starting to map out a bit of a understand a few high-level processes and map out some high-level steps so we could drill into things like pain points. I had one of the key SMEs that was in the room, very strong person, which is great. They really know their stuff, really know their job. I love those people. They can give you really good answers. But this person said, I see it like this, and basically, took that whiteboard marker and started drawing up some diagrams that I'm sure made 100% sense to them. And it was probably made great sense to other people in the room that already know the process. Not a lot of sense to me though, Danny.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it
But
was interesting to try and follow. So
yeah,
I
right.
was
Okay.
at an interesting spot very early on there where, I was losing a little control in this workshop. It was taken down a bit of a different direction. So I'm kind of curious, like, I don't know if it's not putting you on the spot too much. Um, where do you think you might have gone from there? You've got too many people in the room. You've got a person that's representing thing in a way that isn't necessarily that logical. It's going to make things a little bit more difficult. And a new BA, some new people in the project that aren't really there to help control that room either.
Yeah, absolutely. And you didn't have any help on your side, someone helping you as well?
So this
Um,
very first workshop, I actually
yeah.
didn't have anybody else in the room. But
Yeah.
normally, as a standard, we'd have two people. We'd have somebody else
Yeah.
on the team that's there just to help get some notes and things like that.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. I mean, it's a tough one, right?
mm,
Because especially if you have characters like that taking over, and the most challenging piece is, the beginning of the project because you don't know those people.
mm,
So you
exactly.
don't know those
Yeah,
people.
we've just met.
You just met them. You don't know their tolerance to you, to how you run things. Can you be a little bit more, can you challenge them or not?
Mm,
Can you try to regain control or not? The first workshop are the trickiest one because you also want to be polite in certain way, right? Because if you
yes. Yeah.
overstep a little bit too much, it can quickly escalate because people don't know you, right? And they
All
don't
these
have
things
any
going through my
affections
head.
to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really hard one. I guess. Look, I think I would let it run the way. So the first one is always a bit of a discovery for everyone to meet each other, see a bit how read the room almost, right? Who is
Yes. Yep.
doing what? Who is the lead?
Yes.
Who is, like you said, who is the BA? Who is the product owner? Is in and try to understand um, their strengths, so to speak. Will we have a product owner that's so my next question would be about that, but I always try to have one product owner
Hmm.
responsible. And in this situation, if I would knew who is the product owner, I would probably try to regain control via that person, maybe turn to that person and try to get her back to say, look, let's try to refocus on what we want to achieve and so forth. But again, right, it's super tricky, especially for new project, because you don't know that well your audience effectively, right?
Yeah, definitely. So like all of those things are going through my mind. I'm
Yeah.
definitely with you. Like having that product owner is absolutely key. This particular project, they definitely felt like they needed um, so, certainly some very key SMEs. So getting things rented is one thing. Providing some of those maintenance tasks, it's a whole other department within the organisation. So, like you say, nominating one person that's kind of getting some control over both is often difficult within an organization to make that happen, but it does really help. So, look, I was sitting there at that point thinking I've kind of got a couple of options. One, I could put a stop to the workshop, right? I could say, look, we've really got too many people. I think we kind of need to reset. But the main thing that was sitting in my mind there is how hard it is getting these things set up, these workshops set up. They were quite busy. It would really be quite a waste of everybody's time, and obviously very negative start to the project too. So I didn't want to do that. I could have kind of forced my way of trying to run that session. That would definitely work better for me. But I think that the third option and what I ended up doing was essentially just to run with what this person put up, because I feel it's important for the customers to feel comfortable in the way they're expressing their view on how their systems work and where their pain is. And I feel like it's my job to try and translate that. So although the way they put it up didn't necessarily make sense and was a little tough to work with, I just kind of pressed on with that and maybe made some slight adjustments to it where I needed to try and gain some clarity. It was a bit clunkier. It took a bit longer to do. It certainly had some more follow-up questions, but I think it ends up with a better result for the customer. At least was my view. So, rightly or wrongly, that was the approach I ended up taking.
Yeah. I think I would have done the same. I would have let it go, try to learn as much as possible from the key stakeholders in the room. It's never a wasted time, because you at least know the people as well. You learn to know the
Yes, true.
people, you
Yeah.
know, they learn to know you as well. So the first one is always tricky. While you were, look, I was reflecting a little bit while you were continuing on the story as well. So I think what I would say as well is I often have, I think, a kickoff workshop effectively, where it's very high level. So I'm not sure if that was the purpose in yours, or you were straight away drilling into the details.
So it was straight away into the details. Yeah, you're 100% right. This one didn't have a kickoff. Like I wasn't there, so, or at least if they did have a kickoff, I wasn't at that session. So, but I seem to recall, I don't think they actually did one, which is something that we do all the time more recently. But I feel like back then, yeah, I don't think we necessarily did them. Mm.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe the lesson learned here from this is, and based on my experience as well, it was just unfortunate that I think that you were on leave, but having that kickoff workshop with all the stakeholders that you mentioned, even if they are not, if not everything will be straight away relating to them, but having that kickoff workshop, highlighting the high level, implementation, maybe a diagram of to share, maybe a demo of Dynamics, presenting everyone, reminding everyone, I think, of the workshop you're going to run and the subject, so that they can then, I guess, prepare for the following workshop and decide by themselves who is going to which and not. Yeah, maybe that would be a key, one of the lesson I would have learned, I think, from this one.
Yes, I think it would have been valuable. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I also often do is, and I did that after being burned on one for one client a few years ago, is look very quickly. When I start my project, I try to do a stakeholder map.
Hmm.
So I like visuals, right? So what I do is I have a bit of a template where I map all the key stakeholders at my client with the names and picture. Really, the title, the
Take
name, the
their picture.
picture.
Yeah, right.
It's
Yeah.
almost like a PowerPoint slide or two, where I have a list of stakeholders from my client with a picture, name, and title, because I find doing that exercise helps me remember the name, especially at the beginning. You know, if I look, I try to find a picture on LinkedIn or on the intranet, and I put
Okay.
those pictures.
Yes.
Yeah, so that I for doing that forces me to kind of, it's easy for me to remember the names, right? And the titles.
Yes.
So I do
Yes.
this, and then the second piece is who is in my team as well, because sometimes you get new members and so forth. So I paint that stakeholder diagram where I have one lane for the client, one lane for the implementation partner, and then one lane for external. If you have an ISV,
Ah, yes.
you put it
Yes.
there. If you work with Microsoft, you also put, who is your your Microsoft representative. If you have Fast Track involved, who would that be? Or if you have a TSP involved, who would that be from Microsoft from time to time? So I put that in a spreadsheet, in a PowerPoint, and then it helps me kind of know a little bit the stakeholders as well. And then what I do very quickly also is at the beginning, I have quick meetings with some of those stakeholders. You don't have to have them the first day, but if what I found is I have my workshop set up for, I don't know, maybe a few weeks. Look, typical implementation is probably a few weeks of
Yep.
workshop that you have. So in between those workshops, I have, if I can go for a coffee with one or two of the stakeholders, and it's a one-on-one, by the way. So I take one for a quick coffee, try to understand them, see where they come from, the challenges they're facing with the current system. It's just building, you know what? It's building kind of trust, and building as well, building a relationship with those people.
So you do that intro, you build some rapport.
Yeah,
They're great ideas. I'd never thought about sort of putting that PowerPoint together and having that map. That would help me too. I can be shocking with titles and names until I really get to know people, but a face really helps. So
yeah.
they're great
Because
ideas.
doing that, I found that when you get into troubles, and look, I mean, look, those bigger implementation that we often do, there is challenging moments. There's no doubt you will have challenging times, no doubt where there will be some misunderstanding, and the time that you invest in knowing a little bit of those people will pay off dramatically then,
Yes.
because they have
Agreed.
that relationship with you, they know you better, and they will be able to bend a bit the rules maybe for you. That's my experience, and I got burned in the past not doing that, not knowing a stakeholder on one of my workshop. I got surprised, but one of the stakeholders, I didn't even see it coming, and I was expecting another stakeholder that didn't was not so technical. So I guess I was doing a workshop. I was doing an implementation for a client, and I was supposed to have a workshop with few stakeholders. And look, I assume they knew kind of little about some of the topics I was presenting at the workshop, and another person came in during that workshop. I saw the name, but I didn't know who it was. I didn't investigate. I didn't prep before who that person was. And I was very unprepared for the level that person, for the level of technical knowledge that person had and was expecting from me.
Ah, right. They
Yeah.
derailed your workshop there as well. Yeah, we took that agenda somewhere else. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so from that point in time, I really make sure try to understand, because if I would have done that, I would knew who that person would be. I would have maybe a chat with that person, or at least I would know where is that person coming from, and I would prepare a little bit more on my workshop that subject that person really mastered, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of work on building those relationships is sometimes underrated. I think some of the best projects, the projects that you can have the most fun on, and really get the most value out of from the client as well, are those where you've got a lot of trust.
Yeah.
Where you've built that up because you've earned it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it means you can trust, you can be more efficient about what you're delivering, and be more open and honest about what it is you need and where you're having some issues and things like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But trust takes time, right? That's
absolutely,
the key one,
yes.
right? It takes really a bit of time to build. But the earlier you get it, the smoother that whole thing will go.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so that first workshop, perfect. Okay, so
Mm.
what happened next?
So, well, look, after that, we certainly flagged a few issues there. So,
Yeah,
tried to do a little bit of a reset. Certainly got the attendees cleaned up for the
yeah.
next few
Oh, yeah,
workshops.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so that was better. Um, I guess the things that I started to experience more with the later workshops were two things. One was the BA that the customer had was often derailing workshops. I think because they didn't know a lot of these things, they were kind of getting involved and trying to get their own understanding at the same time while I'm trying to do it. Like they were using my workshop for their own their own
yeah,
sort of work. So that tended to make things difficult. And the second one really almost comes back to that product owner aspect. Like I remember having a workshop around mobility for the services that were being done, and the people we had in the room, there just wasn't anybody that could really make a decision. We'd talk about some features, we'd talk about some processes they're doing, and the kind of questions you'd have is like, hey, if you could do it this way, or you could use this feature, is that going to be valuable to you? And the answer I would get would be maybe,
yeah,
which I think is almost the worst thing to have in a workshop.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
got to the end of that one, and I kind of put the hard word on them. I said, look, based on the feedback and the comments we got through this session, I don't think there's any value in you adding any mobility to this project. I didn't get that strong benefit out of it.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it was just it was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's yeah, because I wanted to ask about that key BA that you had.
Mm,
Yeah, it happens. I mean, it happens quite often that on workshop, unfortunately, um, client starts discussing their own. I mean, it's important that they discuss their own processes, but sometimes they go into discussing things that have not really anything to do with your project that
that's
much,
right. Yes.
and yeah, it can be frustrating. And I guess yeah, looking back at my experience, if that would and it happened in the past as well, is I would probably get to the end of the workshop, but I would flag it with the team afterwards. I'll flag it with the product owner or their project manager, and I would say, look, I'm not getting to the I'm not getting the outcome I'm expecting from those workshops because there are too many business related questions in it.
Hmm.
So we need to change something because otherwise we'll be late because I will not be able to answer. So either you prepare a bit more on the side, so you have your prep kind of workshop, and I can help you maybe giving you the question I'll be asking on my workshop so that you can prepare beforehand.
Hmm.
And then so that when we go to the workshop, there is no vague and debate between the stakeholders in some of how the business will operate or, you know, which team will do what. And I don't really need to know that during my workshop. I want to know which team. So, for example, if I have a requirements about case assignment, I don't want to spend half an hour in the workshop listening to the business discussing
Mm,
who is the best team that will get that case based on what. Just have that workshop separate,
yes.
discuss that
Yeah.
separately, and come to me, tell me for this and this and this reason, this is the list of teams maybe to whom we want to assign specific cases, you know. So
Mm.
because otherwise you will just spend too much time on discussion that you know you don't need to be part of.
Yeah, as the lead for those workshops and the overall solution, you're trying to target that end solution. So you've got some things that you need to get through, and I mean the point of a lot of these workshops is to extract that understanding from the business. I want to understand what they're doing. I want to understand what their pain points are. I kind of know once I feel like I get it, and you look to validate that back, of course.
Yeah.
But where it really got derailed is I would often feel like I had that understanding, but this BA perhaps didn't. And so they were continuing to drill
Oh
into
yeah.
things when I wanted to move on. So exactly like you said,
Yeah.
it takes up time. It means the workshop's going for longer or you don't get through as much content as you planned. And it was kind of adding cost to our project. So yeah, you're right. We basically spoke to them and like much nicer than this, but basically said, you need to kind of butt out and just let
Yeah.
us let us run with it was kind of the result. Which they took on board and was fine. And like I said, this person was lovely, and they did their stuff fine. I think they were just genuinely interested. I just don't think they realised the impact they were having on something that was going into dollars going out to a consulting company. So
Yeah, exactly. It's funny
yeah.
that you say in other words than probably the ones I use, which were a little bit maybe too confronting, but it goes back to that trust, I think, where
Mm.
it's funny you say that because I think at the beginning of the project, you might use those more kind and soft terms not to confront anyone.
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, you can be way more confronting once you have that trust with some of the
True.
stakeholders in your company, right?
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
and once you have the trust, and so I've worked with project where we implemented Dynamics successfully. We built the trust. I was or we were the trusted advisor with my team. We knew quite well their stakeholders, and suddenly we started another project on the side, or a new BA came in, or a
Mm-hmm.
new stakeholder came in, and we start losing time and traction.
Mm.
Then again, because you have that trust with that other piece of the company that trusts you and knows you pretty well, you can be pretty much upfront.
Mm.
And I would probably just say, look, we cannot have those discussions in the workshop. We're just burning time for nothing. You guys need to sit down and have those discussions on the side, and then come back when you guys are ready. So again, right, it's really depending of how familiar you are with your client, of what's that trust relationship, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not like you want to jump
Mm.
out and have that conversation after one workshop either. Like you need to, you kind of want to be sure that that's what's going on
Yeah,
before
yeah,
you start
absolutely.
to flag it. So yeah,
Yeah,
it was a couple of workshops in, and we thought, yeah, we need to say something here.
yeah, interesting.
Mm,
And how did you document then requirements? Because you said so you got that spreadsheet from them, or
mhm.
that RFP. How did you kind of continue documenting and capture
So
requirements?
our preference generally is to use a tool to manage a backlog of stories. So something like a Jira or DevOps, something like that. Um, I, I don't. I feel like this was going a little bit back, so I can't remember the exact
Yeah,
reason.
yeah,
But I feel like there was resistance to anyone in their business learning any of those tools at this early
right.
stage.
Yeah,
So ultimately, when we went to build, we had things in Jira. Um, but at that early stage, I think there was definitely some resistance, and they felt comfortable using Excel. Now, I was pretty concerned about that because Excel is not a great one to collaborate on. Like it can be fine when you've only got a few requirements, but something that's large and complex, and you're getting dependent stories and sometimes duplicates, and trying to triage all of that can get difficult. But we were kind of forced into to put into some Excel. That's how they wanted to receive our stories and estimates and things like that. So that's what we ended up using.
yeah. And then, if I understand correctly, you recall then you at some point you transitioned from Excel into another tool
We
during
did
the
eventually.
implementation, right? Yeah.
That's right. But what happened was we kind of got this stuff into Excel through the workshops initially. That's sort of a requirements or discovery sort of section of it. We went in to do follow-ups. Of course, there's questions after the fact. Ideally,
Yeah.
maybe you have follow-up workshops. But here's where we hit another bit of a problem,
Oh yeah.
is that
Tell me.
this same BA kind of, and I don't think this was 100% them. I think it was a mix of the BA wanting to be involved and the business being busy and not necessarily allowing us to take some time out of their day. So we would want to clarify things, and what they really were forcing us to do was to ask the question of the BA, and the BA goes and asks the business,
Oh
which was horrible.
yeah. This is yeah.
Particularly
I
when the
feel the
BA,
pain.
yeah, when the BA's not in the bit, they don't know the business either, and they don't know the technology we're implementing. So there were, some BAs like they know the business really well and they can give the answers for on behalf of the business. That can work pretty well. But yeah, we really needed to talk directly with them, and through this sort of end of the discovery portion of this work, we were kind of forced to do it this way, and it was just a lot of back and forth with notes in spreadsheets, and you would ask a question and you would just get a question back because you can't talk to the business.
Yeah.
That was horrific and really hard to get out of.
Yeah,
They were
yeah,
very, very resistant. Yeah.
yeah. So now looking back at what happened, I can feel the pain, man. I can really, and I had I had similar situation as well. But I wanted to ask, now that you can reflect a bit on that, is was there a way to change that somehow, or?
Look, to be honest, I think these days I just wouldn't use a spreadsheet in that way to do it. I think I would say we need to use one of these tools. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
having that experience, I could really talk to why you don't do
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I'd say previous projects, there's been a little bit of that, and I haven't really had this issue. But this, I could talk to some real experience, and I'd be pushing back super hard on it, like essentially refusing to do it that way. It was a waste of their money.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time that we just didn't need to.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
how about getting more involvement from the business? How would you handle that today? Do you had a think about that, or?
Yeah, I did. So I think this comes back to your question about like those kickoff meetings and just setting expectations around the project. If you're going, particularly an agile type project, if you're going into it and there isn't committed time from the business to spend on that, you're asking for trouble. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very,
yeah.
very difficult if you can't get back to them and get those clarifications and get some answers in a timely manner and really
Yeah.
talking directly to the people that are doing these processes. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Yeah, I think we didn't do enough to set those up. As we said, we didn't do that kickoff that you rightly suggested. And those are sort of some of those times to set that expectation and sort of say, it was probably in the contract, but just not really there with the people to say you need to have some availability for us.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Yeah, they felt
Absolutely.
like the BA was enough. That would do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, we very
Yeah, yeah,
quickly
yeah.
learnt how wrong that goes, how hard
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah,
Despite
it's
best
funny you say.
efforts, not
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
negligent efforts from the BA either. They're doing the best they can, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
just very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, everyone is trying to do their best always, right? But those projects are
Absolutely.
sometimes new for clients, and Dynamics is sometimes new for the BA as well, right? So it's all new things. And as you said, the BA here didn't really know that well the company either, because he just joined as well. So he was kind of trying to learn as much as you, I guess, from
That's
their
right.
processes, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, pretty challenging. Yeah. Just to reflect a bit on what you said about business involvement. I guess what I found is because I had the same challenges, right? But what
Hmm.
I found a good excuse I try to use to get involvement from the business is I almost try to use those workshops as I often use Dynamics a lot, right? So I use a demo of Dynamics, or sometimes I would prototype a little bit the layout of Dynamics to make it more appealing to them. I would change the language, I would maybe change a bit the views, the forms, just to go to the workshop showing them stuff. And I would say, for example, to the client, I would say, look, having the business involved in my workshop in together with the BA, together with the tester if you can, it will just increase so much adoption because
Mm.
I'm training them at the same time, showcasing them the tool. They will better understand the tool. They will be able to better respond to my questions
Hmm.
as well. So I'm trying to sell it that way where, and I found that the clients look, and same, right? We all made the same mistake, especially at the beginning. But I found that saying that with some clients help prioritize the time of then the SME, where it's not only a Q&A about requirements, it's also we investing time in our stakeholders to learn already the platform and then adopt the platform and so forth. It's almost like a selling point to have a bit of more of their attention.
Mm.
I found that working, at least for me, on some of the projects.
So you're saying like you want a bit of a follow-up session with them. They're pretty busy with their day job. They don't want to come along. But if you offer and say, "Hey, I'm going to show you a bit of the project, the product," you'll be able to say a little bit about how this works. You tend to get better traction with them going, "Hey, I'll come along to
Yes.
that." Yeah, right. Okay.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Especially if you say, I'll fine tune a bit, I'll have a prototype and I'll
Mm.
show you, and almost make it a little bit personal. If you know one of the stakeholders is a key stakeholder that you'd like to have on
Mm.
your workshop, you can almost, if you have that connection with them by them, you can either ping them on Teams, or if you go to the office, you can say, look, I'm prototyping this piece that you told me, or this piece that is key for you. I'm prototyping something for you. I would really love if you can come for my validation workshop. Look,
Mm.
it's an hour or two, but I really think it will be a good investment of your time. So I'm almost selling that to them, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That I'll showcase, I'll do a demo of something that might be very interesting for them, instead of just having a Q&A
Mm.
where they feel, if it's just a Q&A, I feel that they feel it's just a waste of their time almost, right?
Mm.
Because it's just responding to your questions. While if you give them something back, I found personally I get better traction
Right. I
on
haven't
my
tried that.
workshop.
That's, yeah, I could see how that would definitely work. I know we definitely do like to build into projects some sort of proof of concept or a little bit of a mock-up or something to, it also serves really well to validate your understanding of how things will work. But I do find that, we understand a proof of concept is, this might not be the final product, might not even look anything like this. This is just like a quick throw something together to try and give you a feel. And customers a lot will kind of feel like that's the product, and if you miss the mark on something, it can almost be more detrimental than helpful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you tend to do
Absolutely.
so we tend to do more of a, prep that up, try and get it right and present something.
Yeah.
Whereas I guess what you're saying here is being a bit more targeted to an individual and helping to use that as a vehicle to clarify things before you even get to that stage. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I like that idea. Yeah,
Yeah, and you're absolutely right on the point to not show something that you cannot then deliver, because you are setting the wrong expectations then, right?
that's
Because
right.
you're
Yeah.
showing them something and then your final product doesn't have it.
Expectations is everything, particularly when you haven't decided on
Yeah,
what's in or out. You've got to be a
exactly,
little careful about how excited you might make people.
exactly. All right, that's great. That's a great story. Now, how did the collaboration evolve, James, throughout this? So you were at the end now, the discovery.
Mhm.
What happened next?
Um, yeah, so I mean, ultimately, we kind of had to get that together and scope it up, get into a backlog, get a priority, figure out some costs, all of that sort of stuff, and kind of get some agreement on what we're going to build and what kind of sprints and things are going to look like. Um, and it kind of got into build from there, I suppose, and the whole way of working really sort of changed for that process because we would go on site
Yeah,
predominantly.
yeah,
Definitely
okay.
works a lot better if you're there, sitting there with the people. We had a change of BA. We had
Oh
a
yeah,
different
okay.
BA come in who was awesome. Really made
Yeah,
really
right.
made the difference. They might not have necessarily known the business too much either, but they were an experienced BA, so they understood business process. They understood how to optimize this stuff and kind of, you know, work that efficient path. Um, that made a huge difference as well. They had some dedicated testers on their side. We had dedicated tester on our side. We used Jira for the stories so we could track things. I think they used a test management tool as well. I can't remember exactly, but I'm going to guess it was probably Zephyr if the stories were on Jira. Um, so testing steps and that were documented and repeatable. And for large projects, I think that's really important. So a lot of the collaboration work happened within Jira for the stories themselves, and the failed tests and getting some of those bugs back. Jira was absolutely critical. We would have the customer own acceptance criteria on stories. We would own design and estimates for those stories. So they were free to change them, but that would trigger a process to say, if you're going to modify acceptance criteria, we need to review that and potentially adjust estimates and design. And once we sort of got into the role of that, those processes worked well. You'd try to stay, a sprint or two ahead in story detail to try to really drill into the specifics and get that all planned out. Have your next sprint ready, so when you kick off, you really kind of know what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Worked well. Overall, the project was under budget and over delivered from where we originally started, but felt rocky all the way through. And I think because there was, a few of those problems early on in the design and
Yeah.
analysis phase, that
All right.
has an effect on the trust, I think, overall.
Yeah.
And then that just tends to follow through the project, despite successes and things going well. There was always a
Yeah,
little bit
right.
of, lack of trust there. And what that meant, there was always perhaps a bit more time spent on administration and writing reports and justifying time and things like that. That just burns dollars on a project, unfortunately.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right, yeah, great. So, but yeah, so overall, great experience. And if I understand, a great success story anyway, right? Even
Yeah, it came out
despite the
well.
challenges, yeah.
Yeah, during build, you could talk directly with the customers, with the business people, because we were there on site. You weren't setting up a 2-hour meeting, but you could kind of go and grab somebody for 5 or 10 minutes and have a quick chat. We just had that direct contact was far better. We were able to, as I said, we over delivered. We were able to identify a few other areas for improvement as you're going through the project and just slide those in. Some of them were very low effort, high return.
Yeah.
Like they had a process going that would involve like 6 people in the business and take them a bunch of time. So like to run this process might have cost them like $3,000
Yeah, right. Yeah,
of
yeah,
their
yeah,
effort
yeah.
around something that was worth maybe $5. So,
Yeah.
you just kind of remove that overhead. Like just take the risk. You're better off taking the risk. You'll be miles ahead. And that had nothing to do with our project, by the way. But it was a process that with this BA that internally we identified and raised it with them and said, look, this just looks a little silly. And they implemented that change within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
it was good to see that sort of stuff roll out. Like I come from a not for profit in
Yeah, right.
background, so
Okay. Yeah.
always very conscious about the budget that's being spent. I really hate seeing this sort of wasted investment. So I'm always
Yeah.
really pleased to see those things and making sure that workshops are focused and all that sort of stuff. I really don't like spending your time without the value.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think the client appreciate that as well. I mean, of
I hope
course,
so. Yeah.
everyone, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, great, nice, great story. So, I guess what would be your key lessons learned that we can share with with the audience to be really careful and try to avoid as quickly as possible? I've noted a few, but I would like to know if you wanted to give it a try first.
Yeah, if I have a crack at a summary, like I think you make a good point in having that kickoff. You need to setting expectations up front. I think is really important. I think one thing here that we haven't really talked about was there was some immaturity in agile and those sorts of processes. They were very pro in terms of yes, let's do agile, but when you went in to do it, they didn't really understand that and really sort of were constantly pushing towards more of a waterfall type of approach. So I think if a customer's not mature in some of those things, building in some time to educate them on it, I think is really important as well. That's something I've learned, not necessarily on this project, but on others. I think that can be really valuable. And if they don't have that maturity and they don't want to learn it, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, making sure you have the right audiences in your workshops is generally something we do, of course, but this was one where that got missed. At least we saw the results of that. And sometimes trying to use the right tools. You don't want to, like, I understand that something like Jira can be it's a bit of a learning curve, perhaps for some people. But using Excel is definitely the wrong one, right? Like, it doesn't have to be the perfect tool, but yeah, avoid something like that that's difficult to collaborate on with a large project.
Yeah.
And making sure you've got direct contact with the business, set that expectation of time.
Yeah.
And some of the others are just the notwithstanding ones. We all know, particularly with agile projects, product owner is super, super important. I don't know if there's anything more important than really having that person. And yeah, getting those decisions out.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, I was reflecting as well. I think the other one I might just add as well is having a BA, an awesome BA is so key. It's
Mm,
such an important role as well, I guess. And whether you call it BA or you call it an SME that can come complement the product owner and I guess ask ask the right questions for you or help you ask the right questions from a business perspective and challenge some of the thinking and some
mhm.
of the requirements that the client wants. I found it so beneficial. I've working on project with different style of BAs, and the ones where you have an amazing BA And to be fair, that doesn't even need to know the business that well.
Mm.
Know enough from IT system and know enough from an industry perspective, that might help definitely if they know enough of the industry, but that knows a bit how IT system works better if they know a bit dynamics, but how those systems work, so that they can help you, I guess, guide the clients towards simplifying as much as possible, asking the right question to flag to the client that what they want sometimes is overcomplicated or they're simply not ready for. If it's coming from you as a partner, sometimes it might, especially if you don't have that trust at the beginning, it might seem a little bit sometimes your clients will not take it for granted so quickly, especially because you don't have that trust. But if you have a BA that helps you along the process, works with them and just validate things, like you try to simplify things, it just brings such more value, because that BA will effectively challenge them or challenge the client, translate those difficult business scenario into something that you and your team will better understand, I guess.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, that BA, particularly initially, as you're trying to build trust and rapport with the customer, they typically trust that BA more than they trust you to begin
Yeah,
with,
exactly.
at least. So they're more honest with that BA. They're getting more honest information, and what you say about challenging those things, I think, is super valuable as well. As you say, it shows that they're thinking through the process, but I think it also will often reflect where the customer SMEs or maybe the BA themselves are perhaps a little uncomfortable about part of the solution or can't
Yeah,
really see how it's going to work.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I think making them comfortable that it is the right solution and it's going in the right direction is really important. So
Yeah.
yeah, having those challenges allows you to focus on those areas where you can kind of increase that comfort level.
Yeah, amazing. All right, James, I think we had an amazing chat. I learned definitely a lot from you, so it was a pleasure having you on the show. Before we finish, if the audience would like to get in touch with you, where is the best place to kind of connect with you or ask you a question following this podcast?
I'd say probably the easiest is probably just LinkedIn would be
All
my
right,
guess.
yeah,
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 I think that's probably simple. A
perfect.
few
I'll
email
share.
addresses and that around the place is always a bit tough, but yeah, LinkedIn
Yeah,
would be great.
amazing. So I'll share your
Um,
LinkedIn details if that's all right
yeah,
in
absolutely.
in the podcast. All right, great.
I've got some good tips here too, so I feel like I've had a little bit of the Danny test on the approach, and hopefully I haven't done too badly. Uh,
Oh no, it was
um,
amazing. Oh, everyone has different processes, so I just love to learn how people do these things,
yeah.
right? Because you as a consultant running, sometimes those projects run for sometimes few months to a year. You have a limited amount of project that you deliver. You have delivered a
Mm,
few, but it's not like you deliver a new project every week, right?
that's right. Yes.
So learning as much as possible of those complex processes from others, I find it so valuable. So
Mm.
yeah, thank you for that, and yeah, enjoy your day, and we'll have a chat soon again, I guess.
Will do. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the chat, Danny.